Welcome to When Gen X Ruled the Multiplex, in which I examine some films near and dear to those of us who are members of the MTV generation. In 1987, director Rob Reiner, who'd had great success earlier in the decade with This Is Spinal Tap and Stand By Me, both of which I've already looked at here, directed The Princess Bride, based on William Goldman's irreverent and self-referential 1973 fantasy novel, from a screenplay Goldman adapted from his own book. While not a box office success, The Princess Bride is critically beloved and is widely regarded as a fantasy classic. It has popped up on multiple lists of the best films of all time. A small boy, homesick in bed, plays video games featuring graphics that were totally state-of-the-art in 1987. He's visited by his grandfather, who has brought him a special present, an old book his father used to read to him when he was sick in bed. The small boy is skeptical, even though his grandfather does his best to hype the book, a fantasy adventure called The Princess Bride by S. Morgenstern. The small boy and his grandfather, who will remain unnamed throughout the film, are played by Fred Savage and Peter Falk. Fred Savage would achieve fame 2 years after The Princess Bride as the young star of the acclaimed ABC series The Wonder Years. Peter Falk is beloved by absolutely everyone for playing everybody's favorite detective, Columbo. We enter the fantasy realm of the book, the kingdom of Florin, where we meet a beautiful young woman named Buttercup and a farmhand named Westley who is devoted to her. She's snotty and imperious to him at first, but soon falls in love with him. Buttercup is played by Wright, then known for the NBC soap opera Santa Barbara. She has gone on to star in many high-profile projects, including Wonder Woman, Blade Runner 2049, and the Netflix series House of Cards, for which she received 6 Emmy nominations. Westley is played by English actor Cary Elwes, known at the time for starring opposite Helena Bonham Carter in Lady Jane. He's gone on to work steadily in film and television, but no matter how many accolades they rack up over their long careers, to many Gen Xers, Robin Wright and Cary Elwes will, first and foremost, always be Buttercup and Westley. In the present, the small boy is disgusted with the story thus far, as he has no interest in a book about kissing. His grandfather persuades him to be patient. Back in Florin, Westley decides to seek his fortune overseas. He parts from Buttercup, reassuring her that he will always return to her. Soon, though, Buttercup receives word that Wesley's ship was attacked by the dread pirate Roberts, and Westley was murdered. 5 years pass, and Prince Humberdink, the de facto ruler of Florin, announces his engagement to Buttercup, who is still in deep mourning over Westley and has resigned herself to never love again. Prince Humberdink is played by Chris Sarandon, ex-husband of Susan Sarandon. Chris Sarandon was known at the time for films like Lipstick and the original Fright Night. Gen Xers also know him as the voice of Jack Skellington in Tim Burton's holiday classic, The Nightmare Before Christmas. While Buttercup is out riding her horse, she's stopped and kidnapped by 3 strange men, Vizzini, Physique, and Inigo Montoya. Vizzini is played by acclaimed actor and playwright Wallace Shawn, best known for playing himself in Louis Malle's 1981 film My Dinner with Andre. Physique is played by world-famous French-Bulgarian pro wrestler Andre the Giant, who died in 1993. Inigo Montoya is played by Broadway star Mandy Patinkin. He would go on to star in the TV series Chicago Hope and Criminal Minds. Vizzini is trying to start a war by making it look like the nation of Gilder, sworn enemies of Florin, has kidnapped and killed the prince's intended bride. Physique and Inigo, who are mild-mannered and friendly, are not at all happy with this plan. Inigo notices their boat is being pursued by another boat, which trails them to the cliffs of insanity. Upon landing, Physique carries Buttercup, Vizzini, and Inigo up the face of the cliff, but the captain of the pursuing ship, who is clad in all black with his face masked to disguise his identity, climbs after them. Vizzini leaves Inigo behind to kill the black-clad man while the others continue on foot. It's immediately clear to viewers that the black-clad man is in fact Westley, though this fact is not yet clear to any of the characters. Before the duel, Inigo and the black-clad man spend some time making small talk. Inigo reveals that his father, a legendary swordmaker, was slaughtered by a 6-fingered man when Inigo was a child. Inigo has spent his entire life preparing to duel the 6-fingered man, and he knows exactly what he's going to say when they meet. "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Inigo and the black-clad man are both extremely accomplished swordsmen, and their duel is long, acrobatic, and impressive. Legendary swordsman Peter Diamond, whom we have seen playing Fazil in Highlander, and Bob Anderson, Darth Vader's stunt double in the original Star Wars trilogy, choreographed the duel and coached the actors, who perform beautifully. The black-clad man wins the duel, but refuses to kill Inigo, knocking him unconscious before continuing on foot after Vizzini, Physique, and Buttercup. Physique remains behind and engages the black-clad man in hand-to-hand combat. Despite the size difference, the black-clad man manages to knock Physique unconscious. Prince Humperdink and his loyal right-hand man, Count Rugen, are hot on the trail of the kidnapped Buttercup. Count Rugen is played by Mr. Jamie Lee Curtis, actor and director Christopher Guest, whom we have already seen in Rob Reiner's This Is Spinal Tap. The black-clad man catches up to Vizzini and Buttercup. Vizzini has a fiendishly calculating brain, so the black-clad man proposes they engage in a battle of wits. He places a deadly poison called iocane powder, which is odorless and tasteless, into one of 2 goblets of wine, and asks Vizzini to choose which goblet is more likely to contain the poison. Vizzini tries to deduce whether the black-clad man is more likely to have placed the poison in his own goblet or in Vizzini's. He tricks the black-clad man into drinking first, but it all comes to naught. Vizzini keels over and dies after drinking because, as the black-clad man explains to Buttercup, he put the poison in both goblets because he spent the last few years building up an immunity to iocane. Buttercup accuses the black-clad man of being Wesley's murderer, the dread pirate Roberts, and he confesses that he is. As Prince Humperdink approaches, Buttercup realizes belatedly that the dread pirate Roberts is in fact Wesley. He tells her she should have waited for him instead of getting engaged to Humperdink, because even death can't stop true love. They kiss, and back in the present, the kid demands his grandfather skip past all the kissing stuff in the book. Buttercup and Wesley head into the dangerous fire swamp to escape Humperdink. Wesley explains to Buttercup that the real dread pirate Roberts spared his life after raiding his ship and trained him in the pirate trade before passing his mantle on to him. After evading fire, quicksand, and rodents of unusual size, Buttercup and Wesley emerge from the fire swamp, battered but alive, only to find themselves surrounded by Prince Humperdink's heavily armed guards. Buttercup surrenders to the prince in exchange for a promise of Wesley's safety. The prince gives his word Wesley won't be harmed, then secretly orders his count to take Wesley to the pit of despair to be tortured. Wesley notes that the count has 6 fingers on one hand and thus is Inigo's sworn nemesis. Prince Humperdink secretly admits to the count that he hired Vizzini to kidnap and kill Buttercup. He plans to murder Buttercup after the wedding to lead Florin into war against Gilder. In the pit of despair, the count tortures Wesley with a device that sucks away years of his life. Inigo, drunk and miserable after his defeat by Wesley, reunites with Physique, who tells him the count is the 6-fingered man he's been hunting. Inigo vows to raid the castle and kill him, but realizes he'll need Wesley's help to pull this off. The wedding day arrives. Enraged by Buttercup's continued devotion to Wesley, the prince storms into the pit of despair and tortures Wesley to death. Physique and Inigo break into the pit of despair and find Wesley's corpse. This naturally traumatizes the small boy in the present, who is horrified that the musty old book his grandfather is reading to him has just murdered its hero. Physique and Inigo take Wesley's corpse to the cottage of a healer named Miracle Max, who tries to bring Wesley back to life with the help of his wife Valerie. Miracle Max is played by Saturday Night Live star Billy Crystal, while Valerie is played by Carol Kane, Simca on the sitcom Taxi. Max and Valerie partially revive Wesley, though he's still more dead than alive. In the castle, Humperdink marries a reluctant Buttercup. The ceremony is officiated by an impressive clergyman, played in a hilariously weird performance by English comedian Peter Cook. Aware the castle is under attack by Wesley and his friends, Humperdink cuts the ceremony short. Inside the castle, Inigo at last encounters Count Rugen. Despite taking a dagger to the stomach early in the fight, Inigo manages to deliver his "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die" speech multiple times before finally taking vengeance on his father's killer. Devastated by her marriage to Humperdink, Buttercup prepares to kill herself, but Wesley, still recovering from being dead, stops her. He points out that the wedding isn't legally binding because the prince rushed along the ceremony and she never said "I do." The prince bursts in to kill Wesley, but Wesley manages to intimidate the prince into surrendering. Physique snags them 4 white horses, and Physique, Inigo, Buttercup, and Wesley ride off into the night. Wesley and Buttercup kiss, and in the present, the grandfather finishes the book and bids his very satisfied grandson good night. The Princess Bride tells a simple story about how love triumphs over all, and surrounds that story with memorable characters and a lot of very clever dialogue. In his life, William Goldman was both a successful novelist and a successful screenwriter. He won Oscars for his screenplays for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and for All the President's Men. The novel, The Princess Bride, featured a complicated framing device involving a fictionalized version of Goldman rediscovering a much-loved book his father read to him as a child, only to discover his father had altered the story considerably. That framing device was simplified by just having the grandfather reading the book to his sick grandson in bed, and that framing device has become one of the best remembered parts of the film. In 2018, a PG-13 rated version of the R-rated superhero film Deadpool 2 was released under the title Once Upon a Deadpool. It features a sanitized version of the film with an added framing device in which Ryan Reynolds' costumed superhero Deadpool relates the events of the film to an adult Fred Savage, who who is lying sick in bed just like his child self in The Princess Bride. Fred Savage also reprised his Princess Bride role in 2020's home movie The Princess Bride, a line-by-line reenactment of the film directed by Jason Reitman, which a bunch of big Hollywood stars with way too much time on their hands recorded on their smartphones while in isolation for COVID-19. At one point, Cary Elwes popped up playing Prince Humberdink opposite Paul Rudd's Westley. It was madness. The Princess Bride was only moderately successful upon release. I've spoken before about the audience fatigue with fantasy films which hit in the mid-80s, which resulted in the box office underperformance of Jim Henson's Labyrinth and Ridley Scott's Legend, both of which I've discussed here. But The Princess Bride has become a classic in hindsight. If you ask a bunch of Gen Xers to name the best fantasy film of the 80s, or indeed the best fantasy film of all time, you're going to see a lot of votes for The Princess Bride. As a fairy tale told from an adult perspective, The Princess Bride is very self-aware, in that it knows that some of the elements we love about fantasy stories could be considered corny or outdated. The grandfather spends the film trying to convince his video game-obsessed grandson that the story is worth hearing, and by extension, that the film we're watching is worth seeing. And the grandson serves as a surrogate for audience members who might be skeptical about tales of epic love and princesses and heroes in far-off kingdoms. The Princess Bride is telling audiences, hey, we know this might be a little cheesy, but we think you'll like it anyway. The Princess Bride has become a classic because it is loaded with memorable dialogue and it is perfectly cast. It starred two relative unknowns in Wright and Cary Elwes, both of whom absolutely nailed their parts. In addition to being very beautiful, they infused their roles with a great deal of charm and humor. Cary Elwes literally spends much of the film dressed as Douglas Fairbanks in the 1920 film The Mark of Zorro, and the film clearly wants to invite comparisons between Westley and Douglas Fairbanks, or Westley and Errol Flynn, famous for playing swashbuckling heroes. In 2014, Cary Elwes published a very charming memoir, As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride, in which he details his experiences playing Westley. By all accounts, the actors all got along extremely well and had a great time making this film. Until the end of his life, Andre the Giant would reportedly invite over his pro wrestling friends for dinner and a screening of The Princess Bride because he was so proud of it. Endlessly quotable and endlessly self-aware, The Princess Bride convinced jaded and cynical Gen Xers that maybe, on occasion, true love really does conquer all. Next time, I am looking at the 1982 horror classic Poltergeist. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later.